I've been looking forward to today's guest for weeks, and honestly, I don't really know how to introduce you, but you're one of my favorite people in the world. You were my other track director at Food Church. For those that don't know, I was a summer intern or VUtern at my favorite church, Food Church, which is in Miami, Florida. And I worked in the I Love My City track, which was exciting. It was fun. It was the best track.
Yes.
And I felt really blessed. And I got to work hand in hand with both Kat and Jam. And Jam she's on team at VU Church, and she's overseeing the I Love My City department, which is the VU Church outreach. So I could talk about Jam all day. She is awesome. She is the best. But I'm going to let you hear from her, and we're going to start with her story. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here is the best Jam.
Oh, Aaron, thank you. First, before I even start, I just want to take a moment to honor you. Thank you for just allowing me to do this with you, and you are incredible. It was a pleasure having you as one of our VUterns. You just bring so much to our track. You are a pastor. You pastor people well. You pastor even the other VUterns in such a beautiful way. And so I just want to say I'm proud of you and thank you again. But let's see. So my story, I guess I should just share it all. I guess I'll start off with just how I got involved with VU Church and gave my life to Christ. And so I went off to school, UCF, for undergrad. And after graduating, I stayed there for about a year. And my friends, they were always like posting about this place called Rendezvous, and it pretty much was a young adult ministry at Trinity Church. And I was like, how is this church? Like, why does it look so fun? You know, like I was just very intrigued by it. And so I'm like, okay, as soon as I move back home, I am going to attend a Rendezvous service. And so Rendezvous just means the meeting place, if everyone's wondering, like, what does that mean? And so I know it kind of sounds provocative. But so as soon as I moved back home, I attended my first Rendezvous service, and it was incredible. From the worship to the message, so just the fellowship and how everyone just made you feel welcome. And they didn't even really know you, but it's like they knew you, you know? And so I started getting involved at the Rendezvous. I started serving on the guest relations team. I joined the dance ministry. And so that took place in 2012. And then in 2013, at the women's conference, which they call Girlfriends Conference, I gave my life to Christ. And so for me, I've always known Jesus because I grew up in a household. My family's Catholic, with a lot of Caribbeans were Catholic. And so I grew up in a Catholic household, but I didn't really understand the whole relationship part of being a Christian. You know, it was just very like structure and very religious. And so I didn't really have like a relationship with Christ. Started growing a little bit in college, but it was like when I started serving at Trinity, like I fully like understand what it meant to like follow Jesus. And so the year of 2013, I gave my life to Christ at that conference and said, okay, I'm going to follow you wholeheartedly. Like I am in this. And so later on in that year, Cinco de Mayo was when I decided to get baptized. I was baptized when I was a child in the Catholic Church, but it wasn't something that I decided to do, you know? And so this was a decision that I wanted to make. And so I decided, you know what, I am going to get baptized. And it happened on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo of 2013. And then in that same year, my plan or my dream was to become a physician assistant. But PA school, it's very competitive. And so I decided to start like a master's program. And I'm like, okay, well, I have my bachelor's, let me get my master's. And so that same year, I started a master's program in biomedical science so that I can just become a little bit more competitive when applying to graduate school to get my physician assistant degree. In that same year, 2013 was a year of a lot of different things. That same year, my first semester in graduate school, I was coming home one day and I was pretty much robbed at gunpoint. And not only that, I was kidnapped. And so I was put into the trunk of my car. And literally I was like, this is a joke. Like at first, my first instinct, I was like, this is a joke. Like my brother is playing a prank on me right now. I'm like, what is going on? But as soon as they put me in the trunk of my car, I realized that it was so real. And for me, like I was like, man, like this can't, like, why is this happening to me? Like this was the year that I decided to give my life to Christ. Like I got baptized a few months prior. Like, is this it? Like I literally thought that this was the last time that I was going to be on this earth, that it was the last time I was going to see my family, like see all my friends. Like last time I was going to be able to serve at church was that Sunday prior. And to think back, which just is kind of just ironic, the day before or 2 days before, I went to a Hillsong concert, and it was beautiful. It was like at Bayside, and the last song that we sung was Oceans. And when you really listen to the lyrics and and what you're saying and what you're declaring with your mouth, it's like you really have to be ready for what's to come, because you're literally asking the Lord to take you deeper, you know, and so that you can trust him more. And so literally that's what I felt in that moment, being in the trunk of the car. And at first I started panicking, but I remembered that, and I'm like, no, like this, like I'm going to trust God. I'm just going to pray. I'm going to pray for these guys that robbed and kidnapped me. I'm just going to go into prayer. And so immediately I just felt this sense of peace. And then like, I just started praying for the boys, and I'm like, okay, let me just switch my prayer. I literally heard the Holy Spirit was like, Jamila, be still. And I'm like, okay, I have to be still, and I have to be still in his presence, and I have to pray for these guys. And so they drove around a few times, and finally at the last stop, I thought that they opened the trunk of the car, and I thought that I was going to get raped. And thankfully I did not. Thank God I did not. And I really felt like it was the prayers, because one of the guys was stopping the other guys. He was like, no, leave her alone, leave her alone. And so after that, they like left me alone. And they like kind of closed the trunk of the car for a little bit, like just, I guess ajar is the proper name. And so they were like, oh, wait 2 minutes and then you can come out of the car. And so I waited just a longer time, because I was just afraid. I was like, okay, if I come out of the car, they're going to be there waiting for me, like to shoot me, like that. That's just what I thought. And so I got out like slowly, and I realized they weren't there. And I realized where I was. I was like behind the apartment building that my family and I were living at. And so I got in my car quickly, and I like drove to back to my apartment and spoke to the security guard and let him know like what just happened. And long story short, after that, it took a few months after, they actually did the same thing to another girl, and they raped her, unfortunately. But because they raped her, they were able to have DNA, and they were able to identify the guys. And so they had a lineup for me. Since it sounded like a similar story to mine, they figured it was the same group of guys. And so I was able to identify them in a lineup. And from there, they got convicted, and they're doing time right now in jail. But that all happened in 2013. And so for me, it was a hard time for me to go through, but it allowed me to trust Jesus. And it was just, I think it also did an effect on my family. Like, yes, my family believes in Jesus, but it's a little bit different when they see like, okay, he literally saved my daughter, or he literally saved my granddaughter. Like literally was God's cover girl. Like he was covering me. And so for me, I just started serving harder. Like that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to serve harder. I'm going to give harder. I'm going to go harder, because this could have went differently. I probably wouldn't have been here. And so I'm like, this is my testimony to share. And so a year or so after that, Pastor Rich and Pastor Don Cherie, they decided to launch Boot Church. And so I was going along with them. And so I was part of the first 13. They make a joke and say it was 12. It was actually 13 of us when you really count like our email, everyone that was in the email. And so it was 13 of us in Pastor Rich's house, launching a church. None of us, this is our first time doing it, so we didn't really know what we were doing, but we did know that this is what God wanted us to do. So at the same time, launching church, finishing grad school, like in my mind, I'm still thinking, okay, I am going to go to PA school and get my third degree. And so it was around like 2017, 2018, where I just felt like this tug in my heart. I'm like, man, like I really love medicine, but then I also love ministry. And I think whatever we do, as long as we do it for the Lord, it's ministry. So I can still be a physician assistant and still do ministry, but like I just felt this tug in my heart to work for a church. And so Food Conference is amazing, but Food Conference 2018, I always write down my expectations before going into conference. Like, what am I expecting God to do through me and then to me at this conference? And so one of my expectations, I'm like, I just need clarification on what it is you want me to do. Like, do you want me to go to PA school? Do you want me to do half-time working for a church, half-time working as a PA? Or do you want me fully working for a church? And I got confirmation after confirmation at that conference that he wanted me to work at VU, and specifically children's ministry. Like, that's where my heart is. Like, I love children's ministry. I still am a part of like VU Kids and also VU High. I help with the VU High crew. And so for me, it was just like, man, like I understood why, because honestly, getting into PA school was a journey. Because I told you I was starting school at 2013, and this was 2018. I still wasn't in someone's PA school. And it's like, why am I not getting accepted? Like, I literally meet all the requirements, surpass all the requirements. Like, literally when I speak to advisors, they're like, oh, you're the perfect candidate. And I couldn't understand like why I wasn't getting into PA school. And so when this confirmation happened, I'm like, oh, this is why. Like, this is why I wasn't getting in. Like, this is where he had me. And it's the most beautiful thing ever. And someone said to me, they're like, man, like your passion to see people heal, like, yes, in the physical, but I'm now doing that in the spiritual. And so that's my testimony. That's where I am today. Like, I'm working for VU. I'm now overseeing outreach. I just stepped into this role in the new year in January, which is also just like, Lord, because didn't even know a pandemic was happening. And so I'm thinking like, okay, once a month outreach. No, this turned into weekly outreaches, and it has really just stretched my capacity and just allowed me to have a bigger heart for people, stepping into this role, especially during a pandemic, especially just seeing different stories and hearing different testimonies. And so, yeah, that's my story.
It's amazing. I got to hear it in our track meeting once, and yeah, no dry eye in that track meeting. There's so many places we could go out of that. And the first thing I want to say is that Robert Madu always talks about everyone being connected, and I didn't realize this until you said this. You were baptized on Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is my actual birthday. So like, I had no clue that we were so connected. That's incredible. Mind blown. But I think the next thought that went through my head is kind of, I want to go into the VU Church launch. As a person, like, I found VU Church by accident. I was in a bookstore, and I was on social media. You know, I was just trying to waste time, and I think it was Carl Lentz who posted an IG post or something like that. My best friend just wrote a book, and it was Sandcastle Kings, and I was like, who is that? You know, I didn't know who Pastor Rich was. No clue. And I look up from the book, like from my phone, and his book is right in front of me, and I'm just like, huh. So I picked it up and grabbed it and took it home and read it in 2 days. And then right after I got done reading it, he launched, of course I started following him, he launched the Rich in Faith series on Oxygen. And then of course I followed along with that, and then every every Monday when he posted the sermons online, or at that time it was the audio podcast, I would listen along. So what was that like at the beginning with the original 13?
Yeah. So I was actually on Rich in Faith. Episode 3. I was episode with the guy that I was dating at the time, and we went to Lakeland with him, and like he wouldn't take pictures with me. That was me. When people find out, they're like, "Oh, that was you." Yeah, that was me. But being a part of Launch Team, I just think it's just such a beautiful honor and a privilege to say that you were a part of launching something, you know, whether launching an organization, starting up an organization, but like launching a church. It was just incredible. One, because we honestly didn't know what we were doing. What we did know, though, is that we had to come up with some values, and like, what did our church value? Like, what did we stand for? And so that was one of the most, I think, beautiful things that we did, was coming up with our values and our mission statement, like to bring those that were far from God close to God. But it was one roller coaster, especially with trying to find a location. I think we started off in a bar. Like, our first interest meeting was at this bar, and we were like, people are going to be looking at us crazy. But honestly, the presence of our Lord was in that bar. Like, we turned that bar into a church. You know, we always say that church is not the building, it's the people. And so we just had like an adventure trying to figure out where we were going to meet. We were at a bar, we were at another, like, I think it was like LMNT. It was like an open space. Then we were at the Lyric Theater, and I think that's where Rich and Faith kind of ended, like being at the Lyric Theater. And then literally we would pray, we would fast. That's where our 21 days of prayer and fasting comes from, like how we do it in January, but how we also do it in August, because we did it before launching, officially launching VOO, which officially launched on September 13th, 2015. Is the date when we officially launched, and this year makes 5 years. It's incredible. Like, I'm like, wow. But we literally prayed and fasted for a location, and we had our official location, which was Jose de Diego. And so that part, just finding a location, was really fun, and then also kind of like a roller coaster up and down. It's like, oh no, that fell through. Oh, okay, yes, we got this. Okay, this is the perfect location. But then you also need the people, and so it was a lot of just fellowship and meeting people, and just praying for the right people, for God to bring the right people. Like, he knew that this church was going to launch before we did, and so I think that was one of the main things, and just seeing all the incredible people that came to our launch meetings, our interest meetings, and then they became a part of our launch team. And so, like, starting off with 13 of us grew to like maybe 200 of us launching a church. And so I would say those were probably the most two exciting things, like looking for a location, and then also the people. And it's so crazy, like, just thinking now, like, where I am, like, as an I Love My City director. When we started, I was a part of guest relations, so I did help with Pastor Rich and Don Cherie's assistant at the time, Teresa, who's my now best friend. Like, we became best friends. And I was just helping her and assisting her, but I was the communications person. Like, I was the one who was sending out emails, like a recap of our launch team meetings. Like, I have the emails, like I go back sometimes just looking at it, like, oh, I was a part of communication. We were all part of kids team. We were all like helping take care of the children. Like, it was just a beautiful time back then. But to see, like, I think Pastor Rich, like, we had a heart and soul, which we have like once a season, and he shared a message that was entitled From That to This, or This to That. I forgot the order, but it's like how we went from that to now we are, look at where we are, to this. And it's just beautiful to see, like, how much the church has grown and how so many people have given their life to Christ since we launched. And that's the most humbling thing. And then when we launched the second location, I remember I was crying when we did our soft launch, and everyone was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, it's just beautiful, like, to see like how faithful God is. Like, he exceeded our expectations. Like we weren't expecting this at all. Like we're growing so fast. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about like launching.
That's incredible. I remember when I was watching Rich in Faith, I remember the episode where where Pastor Rich got really territorial with DC going to Burgers and Blankets. I think that's what it was called. And the outreach. And does Vu still do that, or was that a Trinity thing? Or?
It was with Trinity. It was something called M28, like Matthew 28. But we did this last homeless outreach that we did. We gave them burgers, and we're doing it again in September.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I think about it every time. I like sometimes, you know, when you're driving, you're just driving by people and homeless people. I think about that every time because of that scene. But that's neither there. I kind of want to get a little bit more personal with your Vu connection there, and I know serving under you and with you that obviously you're in outreach now, and you do an incredible job with outreach, and I love my city. And let me just say, like, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that no church has done the outreach that Vu has done during this pandemic, because it's been incredible. I mean, we just had a recap video this past Sunday, with giving away to a couple organizations, which is incredible. And again, no dry eye. And then there was another one like probably 2 months ago where you gave a lot of, Vu gave a lot of money, because generosity is our privilege. So I know you do an incredible job with that, and I know you spearhead that. But I know, as you've already mentioned, that children are your heart, and you love children, and you love children's ministry. So I kind of wanted to like get into that for a moment. And I know Pastor Rich asked you earlier in the year to step into I Love My City because of the need. But children are your heart, and you still do a lot of work with children. You record in their messages. And how do you stay excellent in an area that maybe you're not as passionate about?
Wow, that's a great question. I love that question, because honestly, I think about that. Like, like I'm very passionate about children. Like you said, like I love it. Like I will give my all to it. And not to say that I'm not passionate about outreach, because I am. Like I love people and I love helping people. But I think for me, one of the ways that I stay like in it and do it with the spirit of excellence and want to see it get done the best way that it possibly can, I think the testimonies and just knowing that I am doing it for the one. Like with outreach, it's literally the hands and feet of Jesus. Like that's what we're doing. And I think about one of my favorite scriptures in Isaiah, and it was like, then I heard the voice of the Lord said, "Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord, send me and I'll go." Like that's one of my favorite scriptures. And that's what it's about. Like it's not about like what I want to do, but it's like, okay, Lord, here I am, send me. This is what you want me to do. And so I think that's what keeps me going and keeps me wanting to do more with outreach, and allow me to just stay in it with passion. Like, okay, this is where the Lord has placed me. Here I am, Lord, like send me. I'm going to do whatever you need me to do, even if it's not something that I might want to do, but it's purposeful and it's fruitful, and there's a harvest, not for myself, but for so many other people in Miami, Florida. So I think that's what keeps me going. Like just hearing the testimonies, like we give meals out weekly to families in need. And there was a testimony that came in like last week or the week prior, and a wife just said how thankful she is to get those meals every single week. And so I'm like, okay, we have to keep going. We can't stop. So that's the best way I'll answer that.
Yeah. So good. I remembered you mentioned earlier the message from Pastor Rich. I think if I remember correctly, I think it was, "How did this become that?" If that's right. Yeah. And I remember he gave this illustration where I don't remember, he went out for lunch or breakfast with somebody, but he was supposed to watch Wyatt, and it ended up being like this big argument with Pastor DC. It was just such a funny illustration. But do you ever, like, looking back, like, I was supposed to be in medicine, and I wanted to do that. does that kind of itch still come up? Like I still kind of like, maybe on like days that are harder, like, ooh, I could go to medicine. Like that's what I always wanted to do, kind of thing.
Yeah, you have some great questions. So okay, so in the beginning of this pandemic, I'm going to be honest, like this is an opportunity to be honest. It was hard. Like being in a new role, overseeing outreach during a pandemic, it was a lot. Like from doing outreach once a month to now doing it every single day on a week-to-week basis. I honestly, like I kind of spoke about it yesterday when we were talking about rest and Sabbath, and I didn't find myself resting. And it was at one point, I literally was saying that I think I'm going to go back to medicine. Like I can only work 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts, then the rest I'm off. But then I'm like, no, Jam, like that's a good opportunity, but that's not a God opportunity. That's not where the Lord wants you to be. And so it's like times when it gets hard, like I think people think that ministry is easy, but it's not. Like you're literally doing the work of the Lord. And so sometimes when it gets tough, I think about it, but I'm like, that's the easy way out. That's not what I'm called to do. So there are moments like that when it gets tougher. I'm like, I'm just going to go back to medicine, but I'm like, no, that's not where I'm called to be. Like, it's so like God has so much more ahead for me. Like I'm just literally just scratching the surface. And so, and then sometimes, as a human, we can look at other people, and I was literally doing medicine to get the white coat, to get the MD or the PA behind my name, like the initials behind my name, and for the status. I wasn't really doing it for the heart of it. And so being a human, sometimes when you see, like if I see a friend like, oh, she graduated from medical school, sometimes I'm like, dang, I could have done that, but I'm like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. So
yeah, I'm actually really glad that you are not in medicine, or our paths probably wouldn't have crossed. I don't know, maybe they would, who knows. But I'm certainly grateful that you were in the outreach, and I love my city track. But we'll just switch gears and give you an easy thing, because I remember during our tracks, there was a funny thing that you always said. It was an opening sentence, and sometimes you said it like as a host when you were hosting things. I think you know where I'm going. You would say, "I've been reading The Circle Maker, and it's changed my life, or my prayer life." And you said it so many times, and it was so funny. And I think about it every time I come across the book. So I was just curious, is that your favorite book, or do you have another favorite book? Like, and what kind of like, what stood out about your favorite book, if that's not it?
I will say, okay, I have two favorite books. I will say The Circle Maker, and then a book entitled The Right One. I know these are not like typical books that like a pastor or someone who's on the pastoral team will say. Like they'll always bring up a book like about the Holy Spirit. But I love just books that, I don't know how to explain it. Like for example, The Circle Maker, it literally changed my prayer life. Like it brought into a different perspective. And I think that with, for example, the way that I was just praying, I was just like, okay, I did it, but like literally a Circle Maker is about being persistent and not giving up. And if God gave you a promise, you're going to see it come through. You're going to see it. He's going to see it through. And so with the Circle Maker, it literally just speaks about that and attaching our promises to scripture, praying scriptures over your life. Not only that, even taking the focus off of yourself and praying for others. Like in the book, he spoke about like that promises that he saw come to pass because of the obedience to his grandparents, things that they prayed for, or like other pastors, what they declared over their church, and then seeing it years later, like, oh, okay, this is why this didn't happen. Like, for example, I was just reading in the book about a church. It was like the People's Choice Church, and like they were trying to sell their church to like a nightclub, but it didn't go through. And when they think back to it, it's because the pastors prior prayed, and when they received that building, they were like, this is only going to be for the Lord. And so when they think back to it, they're like, oh, this is why this didn't happen. And they ended up giving their church to another church. And it's like, okay, this legacy is going to continue. And so I just love just everything about that book. Like, it literally challenges you to pray more and to keep praying circles around whatever you're praying for. Like, I'm doing the hand motions. And so that's why I love that book. But then The Right One, I also love that book because it just speaks about relationship and just practical things. And so I think that's why I like these books, because it gives me practical things and kind of like a call to action. It's like, okay, when I'm reading that book, I don't have to wait till I'm done with it to change my prayer life. When I'm reading The Right One, I don't have to wait to change the way that I'm dating or the way that I go about my relationships. And so I would say those are my two favorite books. They're amazing. The Right One is just beautiful. Like, even the foreword was written by Carrie Job, a Christian artist, worship leader, and she just shared her testimony, and everything about that book is incredible. So I would say The Circle Maker and The Right One, my two favorite books.
I totally get the book thing though. So like, my favorite two books would probably not be a pastor's favorite two books, like, or three probably, because like my favorite book is Greater by Stephen Furtick, which absolutely wrecked my life, because I look at myself as Gideon sometimes. Like, I have that kind of like relationship, if that makes sense. But and then the other one's Enemies of the Heart by Andy Stanley, and that one kind of wrecked me too and really changed me. But I've been currently reading a book by John Mark Comer that everyone at VU introduced me to, which is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And I have to say, when I finish it, it will probably be in my top 5. So but yeah, I totally get that. And other people, like, I asked another researcher once when we were driving to a serve day, when we had a serve day out of state, and I was like, "What's your favorite book?" And he's like, "Probably something by C.S. Lewis." I was like, "Oh," but that's just funny. I want to ask you one more question, and then I'm gonna let you go, because I know you have a lot of. No, actually, today's Friday, so it's Free Friday. But my last question for you is this: if you could go back in time to any stage of your life, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, either about moving forward or staying the course or something like that, what would you say to yourself?
That's a great question. You are great at this. Let me think. I would say probably to my teenage years, and I made some decisions that, honestly, prior to this, looking back, I regret. But I'm like, there's purpose in everything. Like, anything that was meant to harm us, God is going to use for good. But I would literally tell myself, like, about Jesus, like, hey, there's a person named Jesus who died on the cross for you, who loves you unconditionally, and he wants the best for you, and he has such a special plan for your life, something that, like, you don't even know. And all you have to do is just trust him, and just listen to him and continue down the path that he has for you. Make the right decisions, and not decisions based off of looking good for a man or for your friends, or just make the best decisions for yourself. And so that's what I would tell myself. I would go back to my teenage years, because I think I was like living for other people. I was doing things to impress other people, to fit in, and all that is pointless. Like, it's not worth it. Like, I was saying that to someone the other day. Like, I can't wait to have children, because I'm literally gonna be real with them. Like, hey, I'm telling you, it's not that fun. like you can wait. Like, I'm really gonna be honest. I'm like, this is my story. I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't all that what your friends are amping it up to be. And so I would go back to my teenage years and speak to myself and encourage myself and remind myself that I'm here on purpose for a purpose, and God has a special plan for my life.
I love that. And obviously, I love you, and I love serving under you, with you. alongside you, and still love doing it. Love serving with you. Love Vu. You're just an incredible leader, and I'm so glad Pastor Rich asked you to take over I Love My City. You do an incredible job with it, and like I said earlier, it's my belief no church is doing outreach better than Vu is right now during this pandemic, and it's been incredible, just like from the amount that's going out as far as money to the serving opportunities and how you're keeping people safe, because Miami is a hot spot, but you still have guys like I texted Junior one day, and Junior, for people that don't know him, he's incredible. He just serves every week, and like before I submitted attendance, like I already knew Junior's name's going to be on it, and he's always serving, and I love that. And I think when I thought about that, when I sent out, I was like, well, the reason he's so passionate about it is because he serves under you, and your level of like affection and love towards and excellence in outreach lets everybody underneath him have that same level of passion and influence. Like I say, it's just so good. Like we could just talk about you all day. But I love you, and I thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your story. And I've learned a lot from you today that I didn't know, such as, being baptized on our birthday. We got a whole country celebrating us. Come on. Yeah, and I didn't know you were on episode 3, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch the whole series again. So I'm excited about that. But yeah.
Thank you, so Aaron. This was great. Thank you again. I would love to do it again. Maybe I'm going to interview you.
Let's do it. I'm game anytime.